Hello, welcome to the Honest Wargamer. I'm your host, Rob. This is going to be a review or a kind of quick look through all of the changes that have just come out in the new monthly update that we have been getting, or we are going to start getting, for Age of Sigmar. There's going to be a companion video to this because I don't really want to get into it too deeply in here about monthly updates and monthly updates for Age of Sigmar. So please do go watch that video, which will be out probably tomorrow, where we'll talk about what we think about monthly updates and a bunch of other stuff. But for now, I just want to get through all of the relevant information that's contained within this update. Also, just a little side note, it's been 7 years of the Honest Wargamer today, and if you have liked the content, then thanks very much for watching it. I want to say thank you to all of you for supporting the show and enjoying the show, or, you know, liking what we've done. I want to thank all my past co-hosts and everyone else in and all those other things. I also want to say thank you to the Twitch chat, even though they're trying really hard to troll me behind here. Okay, let's go and look at what the updates are in this kind of monthly update. They have said, and they did say previously, during the last Battle Scroll update, they said we will be doing monthly little changes to change things around. Okay, that's what they've said. Okay, so let's go through it. So there aren't any points changes apart from to Stormcast. And the easiest way to describe this is that this isn't necessarily points changes Stormcast. These are what the new points are going to be for Stormcast, which I'm recording this on Wednesday. The points for the new Stormcast Battle Tome officially aren't out until Saturday. So this will probably be, what we're seeing and where the points changes will be for Stormcast Eternals. So taking a look, most of the points have not changed from the index, but we have started to get, points for certain units. For instance, and probably the most important of those units is going to be the Storm Coven, who've come in at 210 points, which I'm not necessarily saying that they're an auto-include, but they are a very good unit, like we saw with the play pack for Skaven. Some units, like probably the most popular unit in Stormcast Eternals, is Battletome Long Strike Crossbows. They have had a 10 points increase per 3. This will add either 20 or 40 points onto most of the tournament lists that we've seen, so I don't particularly think that that's a major big deal. They have also reduced the points a little bit on Paladors, but who cares? But importantly, and my favorite drop, is the 30-point drop on Hurricane Crossbows, which I think is pretty exciting, especially if you were to take 6 units of 3, which is obviously would be silly. Stormtrade Guard came down 10 points as well. I don't think that's a big deal. But yeah, you've got all of your updated points, and all of the points for, your Lord Vigilant on Morgriff is 280 points. Iridan, who is the outrageous 330 points. But I will be making a completely separate video, a tier list for all of the units in the Stormcast book, like I did for the Skaven one, when we get, we got the points out, so maybe even sometime this week, we'll do a Stormcast tier list for all the different units that you might want to play in your Stormcast book. So we'll broach that at that point. There has been a points update as well to Krondis, I think, went up 20 points, something along those lines. I think there was some sort of points increase to him, but no points increased to Neve, which has been very cool. Yeah, Krondis went up 20 points. Which is fine, because he's still really, really good. But that's what it is. Okay, so those are all the points updates that we've had in this kind of update. A nice little update is that they have updated which of the armies the 2 Skaven regiments of renown can go inside of. So if you want to bring some shooting along in your Slave to Darkness army, you're going to be able to do that. Our first update is to modifier order. So this is like a core rule change, effectively. If you were going to if you were going to choose the result of a dice or replace a dice, that when doing so, you must replace that roll before rolling the dice for it. So this has got a lot to do with the Slaanesh ability. So that's what we've seen there. We've also seen a change, not a change, but a kind of a clarification to strike first and strike last. The first sentence replaced at the start of the phase with after any non-fight combat phase abilities have been used. This just means that it's really just saying that you use all of your non-fight abilities before the strike first step. That's the important point that it's trying to make. So use all of your non-combat abilities in the combat phase. You'll have a bunch of abilities on War Scrolls that say in the combat phase. All of those need to be done before the strike first step. Then you've got returning and adding models. This is a pretty complex update. What this is referencing is that in order to return models to a unit, there already needs to be models in that unit, and you need to return models in coherency. If that unit has 7 or more models, then you need to return a model in coherency with 2 models. This effectively stops what we call stringing, where you would string out a line of returned models to the board, and is kind of a pseudo nerf for some armies that bring a lot of models back to a unit in a phase, because it needs to have not been returned or added this turn. So that's what that change is. And, it's not necessarily like game-changing impactful, but it will have a small micro effect that will, you'll need to be aware of. There are a couple of frequently asked questions about when the start of the battle round is and when war scrolls are. Worth reading. The one about war scrolls is about control values for manifestations, which don't have a control value, obviously. And the other one is about using abilities in the deployment phase, like non-deployed deployment phase abilities. With those all happen after you have completed deployment for both of the 2 players, right? So that's the start of the battle round. And it's actually pretty important, but that's for clarification for either people who are looking for clarification or people who were questioning when they could or couldn't do abilities. So you've either got the acumen to know that you were asking that question, go get it answered there, or you didn't really think about it and it didn't matter. Okay, but the way it goes is deploy everything, use deployment phase abilities. Super simple, with the exception of putting stuff in reserve. Replacement units, add a little bit of clarity, which I think is good. If a destroyed unit had an enhancement and an ability allows me to set up a replacement of that unit, would that replacement unit also have that enhancement? The answer would be no. That's pretty clear. But there are some cheeky things you can do with replace units. For instance, if they had an ability, like a good example would be the Plague Pack, which you can replace. When you replace the Plague Pack, you technically would like refresh your token that you had. Same with Reclusians. If you were running Stormcast Eternals, if the Stormcast Eternals, if you brought a Reclusian unit back using the Stormcast Eternals ability, then you would refresh the token that they have, which is their Memoriams, which is kind of like a fun thing with returned units, is they sometimes get like an ability back, but it's such a fringe case, it doesn't really matter. But that answers a really good question, which, I think is really good. This next update is huge for me, and all Neve Black Talon fans shout it out, or specifically Lorai fans. Army composition in Regiments of Renown. If a Regiment of Renown includes a wizard, could that wizard cast spells from the Universal Manifestation Law that was picked for that army? The answer is yes, which is cool, because Lorai is a wizard. Also, the Coven of Thrix also have the option. To have a wizard as well that you can include in other armies. What this means is if you include one of the generic or the universal manifestation laws, like the Morbid Conjuration one, which is obviously the most popular, they're going to be able to cast spells doing it, which I think is what most people are playing it as already. But now that clarification has been brought in. However, if you do bring your non-universal manifestations, your army special ones as an example, they're not going to be able to cast them. So I think that that's pretty fun. That's a nice change, and I'm a huge fan because I think Regiments of Renown might be the most interesting way that they could develop Age of Sigmar 4, which I'll talk about in another video. Our next update is to Starstrike, the battle plan. Number 1, you probably shouldn't be playing it, in my opinion. But number 2, you might love Starstrike. But Starstrike is now got a new thing that happens where, and if you don't know how Starstrike works, random objectives land on the board at certain points during the game. If an objective would be set up wholly or partially on a terrain feature, do not do so. Instead, inflict D6 mortal damage on each unit wholly or partially on that terrain feature. That's pretty devastating, especially tough for people like Sylvaneth, who literally have to stand near or on or in their terrain feature, which I think is a little bit disappointing. Obviously also tough for people who are standing inside their Loon Shrine, not in their Loon Shrine, sorry, in their Shrine Luminor or in their Nussy, any of those, or the Mussy, sorry, they stand in the Mussy. Any of those, and then they just end up taking D6 mortal damage, just feel a little bit silly, to be honest. But that is the update to Starstrike. Let me know what you think about that in the comments, because that's pretty funny, TBH. The next change is to Slaanesh, and I know all 12 players are going to be super excited about these changes. The first one is a change to the timing of excessive depravity, which is the ability to give out dice to your opponent. What this does is change it to once per battle army at the start of the battle round, so you can't do it multiple times, which some people were doing before. There's also been a change to Sinessa, the voice of Slaanesh, arguably maybe the most underplayed war scroll in Age of Sigmar 4, maybe unplayed in Age of Sigmar 4. But the Sinessa, the voice of Slaanesh, didn't have a points change or a massive rules overhaul, and instead what actually happened, they just changed her spell a little bit to being only able to target heroes, which I don't really know why that changed, but there we are. Now we're getting on to the big spicy changes. It's time for the Lumineth players to just take a seat. If you go back and watch the review that I did of the last change, the last battle scroll change, I did say that LRL are the best army. They're the S tier army. They're way better than every other army. You know, and the stats have backed that up. They have an incredible win rate, specifically based around the Hurricane Temple battle formation. Okay, so they have changed elements of that, and let's talk about what those elements are. Right, in the effect of move like the wind, replace each target can move a distance up to move characteristic with move 2d6. So what are we talking about? So let's go quickly talk about it here. I'm using the website ageofindex.com, which has all of the information that you need for any army in Age of Sigmar, including the recent Skaven and Stormcast books, which for some reason are just available to look at there. So go check it out. Anyway, in your shooting phase, move like the wind. Let me explain what it does. You can only use this ability if you're not using any of the facets of war abilities, which are the other abilities they have. Pick up to 3 friendly Hurricane units, 3 that are not in combat to be the targets. And this is in your shooting phase. Each target can move a distance up to its move characteristic. That's now changed to 2d6. It cannot move into combat during any part of that move, and it cannot use abilities for the rest of the turn. Okay, well, why was this such a problem? Well, let's talk about the most common units that we saw in LRL lists, which is something like Severith or a Wind Spirit. This Severith can move 18 inches. So it can move 18 inches, or previously it could move 18 inches, it could shoot, and then it could move another 18 inches, which means it was always really difficult to, it was always really excellent at scoring battle tactics, still is. Also was really, really good for denying battle tactics, moving in places on objectives that people weren't expecting, and generally just being untouchable, which is a very classic kind of Fox thing to be in this game, not in English culture. So they've changed that now to 2d6, which adds a lot more risk into doing that. You can still do it 3 times, but and you can shoot. They shoot 12 inches. So the average on 2d6 is 7. So you can be 12 inches away, move another 7. You're still 19 inches away from your opponent. But yes, you have moved from the absolutely insane 18 inches all the way down to just a 2d6. And I think a lot of people will see that as a nerf. Well, it is a nerf. A lot of people will see that as too aggressive. But genuinely, ask your friends who have, other armies who don't have LRL, do they have a unit that can do anything even remotely the same? And the answer is no. So whether or not you think it's worth the points cost that it's currently worth, its utility is insanely valuable compared to other armies, and you can do it 3 different times. If you had that as an ability in other armies, I think other armies would take it. So just, try to understand it's not as strong as it was, but it's still very strong, and it's also still very effective. Does it mean it's like an auto win? Not that it was ever an auto win, but you're going to have feelings about this. Let me know in the comments below, but it needs to change because your army's too good, and that always sucks. The next change is to the Yadrillion Riverblades. Okay? Yes, Shadow Sun in the chat is saying, Ironjaws do a 4-inch move once per round. Okay, that's their battle trait. This is your sub-faction ability that's had a slight reduction in capacity. You've still got a very strong army. Anyway, Riverblades. Change to Riverblades. If this unit is in combat, it can move to 2d6. What's the change? Well, Riverblades previously had this ability. In any combat phase, if this unit can move 2d6 inches, it can pass through models in enemy units, but it must end that move in combat. So this was in any combat phase. And what this meant was, in every combat phase, you were able to basically make a free 2d6 in charge because you didn't have to be in combat and you could get into combat, right? That would be what you could do with the with this ability. They've now changed it to you have to do it in combat, which is, again, a nerf. But obviously this was stupid. Okay, this is way too good. And this is still on this unit, which has an outrageous amount of attacks. 2 shots from the shooting attack, 3 attacks in combat for 51 attacks or something, 52 attacks across the unit. That's only 160 points. And the fact that it can still make a 2d6 move in any combat phase means, you know, if you charge me, I could 2d6 move. And as long as I end up in combat with another unit, the threatening unit that charged me is going to now not be in combat. So it's still a very effective ability. And again, ask yourself, would this ability, it's just taken something that was silly and broken to something that's wildly effective. So you've gone from past an S into the broken tier into just an S ability. I don't think you should complain about that personally, and it's very fine. Anyway, those are the changes to Lumineth. Are they going to affect them in any way or capacity? I still think they're the best army in the game. I still think that they're much better than every other army, and I don't think this is going to change their win rates at all. It just means that sometimes you might be able to beat them. Seems fine, to be honest. They have also made a change to Nurgle. That change to Nurgle is called Desperate Remedies, or it's the ability Desperate Remedies. And the TLDR on this is when you give a unit a disease, the disease keyword, which is a Nurgle battle trait ability. Previously, what you could do is you could use something like a rally, which was an attempt to use a heal ability. You wouldn't even need to roll a dice, and you could remove the diseased keyword. Now, it's just saying that you need to roll a dice. You need to effectively actually do a heal. Let's say you do a heal on a 3-up. I'm going to target that unit and do a heal on a 3-up. Previously, there's an argument that you wouldn't have needed to actually roll the 3-up and you just succeeded. Not you succeeded, you remove the disease keyword. Now you have to succeed whatever dice roll it needs to be to remove the disease keyword. So it's a slight increase or a little bit of a buff to the Nurgle mechanic, which is pretty weak anyway. So that's good. That's Desperate Remedies for them. Then we've got a change to Lord Croak, of all people. And this is a change I'm actually a little bit disappointed in. What this is a change where previously Croak has an ability. Let me go find it for you. Croak has an ability called Arcane Vassal, where in any hero phase, once per turn, you can pick a friendly skink wizard within 18 inches, and then you can measure the range and visibility of the next spell ability used by this unit from the target instead of this unit. Now, the change is the next spell ability used by this unit with the next spell ability used by this unit in this phase. Okay, and the reason that, the target is treated as a caster for the purpose of other abilities or the effects of spells are unbind. What this ability effectively means is you can't proc this ability in a hero phase and then use it in the next turn. That's what this means. Because that's what you could do previously. Instead, you got to do it in the same turn, which is fine. Okay, and then they've done the same thing with the Slan Starmaster. It's fine, but I'm a little bit disappointed in this. I think the idea of Age of Sigmar 4 in that you have very active choices in when you want to use abilities, and you generate your own quote-unquote stack. Not that I necessarily like magic or anything like that, but the fact that you basically determine your own order of operations. And then removing that ability because you were just being clever and orientating it well feels like a mistake. But whatever, it makes that army it doesn't make any effect really, but it's a fringe case. A couple of changes to Soulblight Gravelords, which is pretty cool. Don't forget, we've already had that change that we just have talked about with returning models, which will impact them because this is probably the army where you see that most. Luke of Eyes had a small change. It's not a big deal. Vampire Lord has had a change to Sanguine Blur, where it's no longer got the core keyword. What this means is previously it could attempt to do a move on a 3-up, and if it failed, it wouldn't be able to move. Now they've taken that away, which is the change that they made to a bunch of other abilities in the last battle scroll, which is good. And then Belladama has had a change, which is excellent. We love this. And had her a change to Under a Killing Moon spell. I'm pretty certain it's a spell. Let me go find out 1 second. It is a spell. Effectively, what this would do is it would add one to the rend characteristic of up to 3 friendly direwolf units within 18 inches. The problem with this is that the Rotting Fangs and Claws weapon that direwolves have unfortunately, is a companion ability, so you weren't able to use the ability. To quote my friend Kenny in the chat, who said, I've just been cheated then for 8 weeks, which is fine. They've changed it so that it will affect companion abilities. So, importantly, Belladama's spell is going to give Direwolves Rend, which is good, because, you know, it feels like that's what it was meant to do. So that's a good change, and I love that. There's been a clarification to Daughters of Khaine and their sacrificial knives, and I like that because I think that they've got a really strong build in Witch Elves, but really hard to actually produce. And then we have a bunch of different changes to both Skaven and Stormcast. And, you know, for a monthly update, this means that you can pretty much guarantee or hope that you're going to get your Battle Tome full, FAQ and kind of review every month. Or if not, if it skips the first month, it'll be in the second month. I think that's a real positive change for monthly stuff, but, you know, we'll talk about that after. Okay, for Skaven, Battletome Skaven, they've talked about the Plague Pack ability. They've got a little token where any rolls of a 1 when doing a chant, you can remove him, and re-roll it. This now has made sure that it's not just a chanting roll of a 1, it's an unmodified chanting roll of a 1, which is a nice clear change. And then there's an update to its truly awful Army of Renown that doesn't really matter. There's a couple of special questions here. Specifically, if I give crit mortals to Storm Fiends have got one of the weapons that have got a crit D6 hits on the shot gauntlets. What happens? It turns out crit mortals overrides crit D6, and you do not generate both at the same time. Now, this is pretty interesting because actually this is one of the few instances we've seen in the whole of Age of Sigmar where there's a potential to have a clashing crit ability on a weapon. This will be very interesting in the future because this has had an individual FAQ. I do wonder if in the future we're going to actually see a hard and fast core rule about this as we see more Battletome releases, more armies, regiments of renown, maybe universal abilities or GHB stuff in the future. They probably should have a generic rule for this where you can either only pick one or there's some sort of like tree for which one is the strongest or which one, supersedes the others. If an enemy unit is affected by the Gaze of the Nor ability, must attack Visit Scour. Can the models in that unit that are not within combat range of Visit Scour after piling it? Combat range of Visit Scour after piling an attack? The answer is no. And this is a pretty cool ability. Visit's really survivable in combat. Really survivable in combat because you can pick a unit, say you've got to just target me, +1 to hit, +1 to wound. -1 to hit, -1 to wound. Actually quite survivable. That's a good ability. And this means even less damage potentially going into your army. And then there's some clarity on Warp Grinder ability as well, which is good. And lastly, we've got Stormcast. And this is cool for Stormcast. We've got a bunch of different changes here. First one is to Praetors, which I think is what they covered last in the last FAQ, which is you can make sure that you do soul bonded to one of your heroes, even if they're in reserve, which is a good change. Big news for people that want to buy the Stormstrike Paladors, or did buy them, or impulse bought them. They had a terrible profile on the Palador mounts, the Chocobos, where they were hitting on 5s and all the other Paladors hit on 4s. They've now reverted this to be only hitting on 4s, which is kind of fine. I think that's a good change. But I still don't think, they're very good. Just as an FYI. They have changed Hurricane Crossbows to only be in your shooting phase. They changed the Lord Vigilant on Morgriff's ability to say that the target cannot use commands, cannot pick to be commands, which means you just shut them down. But unfortunately, the Morgriff still isn't great. They've clarified what's happening with the Dias Arcanum, and that is everything. This other stuff is to do with Path to Glory and things. Okay, so what do I think, and what do you think of these updates and changes is, I guess, the big question. I think the changes to Lumineth were necessary and weren't particularly impactful. In the next Battle Scroll update, and I've said this before, I'd really like to see shooting in your opponent's turn be 2 CP. I think shooting is probably one of the most relevant, not problems, I guess, or one of the biggest strengths that you can have in Age of Sigmar 4 at the minute. One of the things that's strongest in Age of Sigmar 4. You probably need to, address that and do something a little bit better than that. Better with that, I think. I think LRL needed the change, and I think this is good, and I don't think this is a change enough that LRL aren't the best army in the game, or at least in the top 3. maybe like top couple, but I think they're very, very much up there, which is good. So your army has not been nerfed into the ground. Maybe the build you're going to say or feels like it's nerfed into the ground, it's just not as strong. And many armies don't have that. The one terrible thing, terrible is a bit hyperbolic, I apologize, but like the one bad thing, I guess, is that feel like there were really no changes to the underperforming units or armies. And I know this isn't meant to be like a balance patch or an update, but if they are doing enough work to recognize that some of the LRL units are too popular or too good, then you feel like that they could be recognizing the armies and units that aren't doing really good. You know, giving an extra battle trait to Ironjaws as an example would be something I'd like to see. A bunch of different armies I'd like to see them improve versus just, you know, do nothing with. And I think that that's maybe the disappointment if I have one. But obviously, monthly updates, I think, will end up being the hot issue, which we'll talk about in the next video. Thanks for watching my video. Thanks for tuning in for, you know, if you're a new viewer or if you've been watching for 7 years. I super appreciate it. Thanks very much. I'll see you soon. Goodbye.